All right, in this second video, we are now looking at domain and range of the XY coordinate plane graphs. We're going to approach it the same way. We're starting with domain, so we're going from left to right. Since I don't have the ability to point in this style of video, I'm going to draw these extra lines in here and label them left and right. If you're doing this, definitely use pencil because you'll want to erase it later, but you can look at this visually too. I want to see how far left does this go and how far right. And notice there are filled in circles at the end. The only time you will see the parentheses will be if you have an open circle on one of these types of graphs or if it goes to infinity. Otherwise, the general rule is if you see the numbers, you're putting brackets. So we're going to start with brackets. The furthest left it goes is -3, and the furthest right is +3. And then I also want to do that in inequality, so I'll do -3 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 3. And just notice in the directions it does say interval and inequality, so you want to make sure that you do both. Let's fix this a little. So just make sure we are doing left to right. Include the x when you're writing domain. Now we have to switch our thought process, and this is sometimes harder than other times. It just depends on the graph. We're going lowest to highest, so I'm now going to draw a line at the lowest point of this graph, if I can, and the highest point. Sometimes if it keeps going, we wouldn't be able to draw both. And I'll use L and H to represent lowest and highest. So remember, range is lowest to highest. If you're using interval, you would do comma. Otherwise, you're using the inequality notation. So again, we're using brackets. Just be careful, the lowest that this graph goes is -6. This is a tiny -5, so it's a little hard to see. And then the highest that it goes is 3. And even though there's not a closed circle in here, it does go through that point. There's no open circle, so you would put brackets. And then switching to inequality, we put the less than or equal to signs to match up with those brackets. And then our last thing to check for is this graph a function? So remember with our vertical line test, I would take your pencil, just slide it across. I'll just draw one vertical line in here. I can only do one. And I'm not able to drag it, but if you take that vertical line or your vertical pencil and move it around, if you can't get it to hit the graph at more than one point, then it is a function. So that's going to happen here. This is a yes for it being a function. All right, our second one's very similar. It's a line, so same idea. We're going to start left to right. Here's my furthest left. Here's my furthest right. So my furthest left is at -4, and my furthest right is at 1. And I want to make sure I do both. So I'm just putting a line down the middle to separate the interval versus the inequality because they're technically two different notations. And then make sure for domain you put x, and when you switch over to range, you want to make sure you put y. So I'll erase these and then mark up my lowest and my highest. Be careful when the diagonal line goes the opposite direction. Sometimes people flip-flop the lowest and highest. You always want to make sure you have it in the correct order. So the lowest is -3 and the highest is 2. In inequality notation, both less than or equal to signs again, just make sure you put y for range. And then is this a function? It is. It passes the vertical line test. We have one more line before we get into some that have arrows at the end. This is an interesting domain. It only goes through -2. It's a vertical line, goes through -2. So actually, because it's only one value, we're going to put it in squiggly brackets, set notation. And this would hold true if it were a horizontal line. That would be what your range would look like. And then the range is different because we do have a clear starting and stopping point there, or lowest to highest. So here's my lowest and here's my highest. The range is going from -5 to 5, or -5 less than or equal to y less than or equal to 5. Now this is an interesting vertical line test. I'm going to draw my vertical line in green. So it goes through the graph, and what I do want you to notice, even though there's only 2 endpoints, it hits every single point in between, and there's lots of little points in there. So it's definitely more than 2 points, and this is definitely not a function. Vertical lines themselves always fail the vertical line test because there's infinite number of points on those lines. All right, we're just going to finish up with 8 and 9. The last graph does have 2 pieces, but that's one that we will pick up together next time we meet. Or if we are together, I will go over that one with you in class. The domain for this next one is a little bit tricky. What you have to envision is what is happening to the graph at the ends here. Now I have arrows. If I were to extend this graph out, it keeps going. I'm going to over exaggerate. Keeps going outwards to the left. This keeps going outwards to the right. If I'm not able to draw lines to determine what that left and right are, and we have these arrows there, that's telling me it goes as far to the left as it can go, which we don't know how far that is. It's infinity. It just keeps on going and going. So it's going to be -infinity to infinity. And in inequality notation, you can write it this way. I did actually see a few people writing it like this on the review. That is another option. For now, if I'm looking for interval or inequality, the 2 that are there are the ones that I'm looking for. So make sure to keep the -infinity to infinity aspect. And then the range is actually a little bit easier to see because you don't have to see like the expanding out aspect. The arrows are literally pointing down. So this is pointing down here, which means it's going to keep going to -infinity. That's going to be your lowest. So it keeps going, and then the highest is up here. So we're going from -infinity to 4. Technically, this is a filled in circle up top here, so we would put the bracket. And then your 2 options for the inequality, you can do -infinity less than y less than or equal to 4, or you could drop the infinity and just do y is less than or equal to 4. This one also is a function. It passes the vertical line test. And our last one we'll look at is actually one of the easiest ones in terms of domain and range, if you look at the arrows. This graph keeps going forever to the right and to the left. So automatically forever is our infinity. And then range, same thing. You just have to switch gears and think about, okay, how low is this going? Well, this graph is going down as far as it can go and up as far as it can go. Still -infinity to infinity. And also, this one is a function. All right, again, we'll stop there. You have enough to complete your practice at this point, and we're going to do the last graph with the 2 pieces together.